If you are somebody who's trying to write a mystery or a thriller or a suspense novel, or if you're someone who loves reading them and want to deepen your appreciation, this video is just for you. You're going to love it because I'm going to share with you from extensive reading the key facet that makes for great mystery, suspense, and thrill. On the way through this video, I'll give you various examples of things that I used to develop this idea, and a couple of extra pointers come in along the way which relate to it. So having said all of that, let's dig in to the key element of mystery, suspense, and thrill. The first thing we must consider to understand mystery and thrills and suspense are the two qualities of terror and of horror. And by horror, I don't mean gore and gratuitous violence, although that can be used at its extreme end. I'm talking about the daily qualities. So what's the difference between terror and horror? Which is more important? Terror, by a long, long way. Terror is the anticipation of danger, the anticipation of threat, the anticipation of something coming in. We call it dread as well, don't we? We know something's supposed to arrive, or we think that there could be some danger coming our way or our loved one's way. Horror is after the terror has finalized, after the event has taken place, or it could be in the moment of being attacked. You change from terror to horror. So for instance, if you saw a train coming down a track and a car trying to get over the road, over that train track, you would be terrified because you're not sure, are they going to hit? Now, if they do hit and there's carnage everywhere, you're then horrified. Do you see the difference between the two? It's important to know that terror is by far and away the more potent of the two when it comes to mystery, suspense, and thrills. The anticipation, people can't look away from it. The horror, people can pass over the pages. That's the big difference. So, having said all this about terror, now we're going to enter the most important rule of mystery and suspense. Are you ready then for the number one key, the maxim, the cornerstone of great suspense and thriller and mystery? It's this. Mystery and suspense is not about what we see, but it's about what we know we're not seeing. Did you get that? Suspense and mystery is not about the things we see. It's when we know that we're not seeing. And that creates a great tension in us. Now, the rest of this video, I'm going to take you through various elements of mysteries that, as soon as I mention them, you'll recognize them from various stories. But we're going to see how these feed into this idea of when we're knowing that we're not seeing, and why that makes us anxious. This will also reveal why some books seem to do it so well and others don't. Many would say they understand the comment I've just said, but it's like a lot of things. You only know it when you've made it your own, when you've held it up with many an example and go, right, now I understand fully. And that takes thought. So let's get into elements of mystery and how they demonstrate this fact. Okay, so the first element we'll look at is a classic. It's the curse or the prophecy. You know, some cursed object which someone in the family's got a story about, or some prophecy, the fifth generation from Mr. Jones to be in this house will have XYZ happen. Now, the protagonist may not believe those things, but the suggestion of them creates a kind of anxiety, especially if things begin to go wrong. Why do curses and prophecies work? And it may not be your bag, but just we're learning the principle behind mystery here. They work because it gives us an awareness of a knowledge that is beyond our full understanding. We're not seeing everything, and now we know we're not seeing it. A more modern example of the principle behind this prophecy and curse is when someone receives some cryptic message, like someone's left a slip of paper on their desk at work. No one seems to have seen anybody come in and leave it, but this message may sound ominous, it may sound threatening. Suddenly our protagonist is aware that they're not seeing everything. And that makes them anxious, and it makes us as the reader vicariously anxious as well. We do not like not knowing, and we'll touch on that a bit later as we go through these points. So that's just one example. Let's look at number 2. Second up, and this can be used, often goes hand in hand with curses and prophecies, is the ancient and relics and jewels. Now, why do these create tension? Why do they make us anxious? Well, not always, but they can create an atmosphere where you're just out of kilter or you're never quite certain. And the reason for that is the ancient is associated a lot with lost wisdom. The ancient is almost like another planet to us because different rules govern things. What knowledge did the ancients have that we no longer have? And have you ever been to an ancient place and been sort of struck with a sense of the sublime? You know, there's nothing magical about the stones that build these places, but there's an inner sense in us that, wow, how did they do this and what did they believe and what maybe don't we know anymore that we once did? Relics have the same thing. So the ancient is from the past being a different place, and that makes us uneasy. We know we're not at home in it. Relics, that comes to religion. So we're talking the spiritual, we're talking otherworldly, those kind of things. Now, no matter how pragmatic and rational your protagonist may be, are there certain, well, they used to be called the mystery religions back in the ancient days. Are there things we don't fully understand? Of course there are. Is there a sense in all humans that goes superstitious at times? Yes, there is. Relics embody this and bespeak to ones who either they could be guardians of a relic, but they understand certain mysteries we don't. Of itself, a relic is not going to make a mystery. But factoring it in as a component, or it could be the central and you build around it, the reason it works is because our protagonist and the reader is suddenly made aware that they're not seeing everything. And that not seeing everything makes us feel uneasy. Our feet don't quite touch the ground. A third element that is used in mystery and suspense books is nature, wild nature, and weather. Have you ever stopped to wonder why this works? Well, normally the weather tends to hide things. Okay? So if you think of Jack the Ripper, as you know, many books have been written about him, what is always the weather at night time when Jack the Ripper's about? Mist. What is the mist doing to us as a reader? Well, if we're seeing it from a certain person's perspective who's not Jack the Ripper, who's either a detective or someone who's got it coming, the mist cloaks everything and a silhouette will come through it, or the person can't see clearly, or they don't know how dangerous the alley that is that they're going into. It's not that we know Jack the Ripper is in the alleyway, rather we suspect he could be. We're aware that we're not seeing something. And the person could just walk through the alleyway. But then again, they may never come out the other side. Who knows? Mist does that. Snow is another one. So think of great blankets of snow. One, it isolates people. When there's a sense of isolation and we're aware that maybe something's wrong already in the book, that sense of isolation, we don't know if anyone is nearby. And it's hard to hear in snow. What about if someone's walking through snow in, you know, maybe they've got some posh estate and they're well up a hillside and they're just tramping through snow and it's all virginal snow except they come across one footprint near a bush. Now what do we have? We have unease. Why? Because suddenly we know we're not seeing. This is evidence of something we can't see. And we don't have all the facts. We get tense. I just want to interrupt this video from a quick word from our sponsors, which is you, the viewer. If you love literature, if you want to get more out of it and dig into it and would like to join a community of readers, then come and join my Patreon community, where on the top tier you get access to 3 additional videos, exclusive videos a month, and on top of that you get to mix in a book discussion at the end of a month, because we read 1 book per month, and then after that we have a discussion on Zoom together. That sounds like something you'd be interested in, then please go along to my Patreon. Anyway, back to our list. Okay, how about this? Maps and mazes. Now, you may just think in terms of a classical maze or some secret map, your old map, but we'll talk about it and then we'll make it modern. So what does a maze do? It bewilders. That's the whole purpose of a maze. In fact, do you know the difference between a maze and a labyrinth? A maze is designed to stop you getting in, and a labyrinth is designed to stop you getting out. I would say the labyrinth is probably more scary. A maze is more for spy fiction, an adventure trying to get in somewhere. So let's think of a labyrinth. Your protagonist, we already know the story's developed and now they're sort of aware of a threat. They're now placed in a different city that they've fled to, or they're new in a particular city. They don't know its layout. The person, let's say it's a serial killer in this case, clearly knows their way around the city. For some reason, your protagonist has been honed in on as the next victim. They are trapped. Suddenly the streets are no longer streets. They are a labyrinth. And what does that labyrinth do? It brings an awareness that we don't know where the bad guy could be hiding. We can't be sure of what route to take. We don't know if there's an escape route this way. A labyrinth closes in and it gives you the sense of being stuck, which is a classic Gothic trick. And that builds and heightens a sense of tension. Maps, the same kind of thing. You look at maps and sometimes it's hard to read them. Or you think of, these ones set in jungles where they're going off to find old buried treasures and everything. The map's never always what it seems. What you're looking at doesn't seem to fit, but you know the map must be right, but you're not seeing something. That's where the tension comes in. You know you can't see it all, whether that's visibly or mentally. Now I want to give an example, a bonus here, on the idea of the maze or the labyrinth, which is really powerful in mystery and is used quite a lot more modern books. Amnesia. Amnesia is a labyrinth. There's sudden flickers in a protagonist's mind. Maybe they've been involved in some crazy thing in the past and baddies are out to get them because they know where the gold's buried, but they can't, or they witnessed an attack, but they've lost their memory. What is that like? They know that they're not remembering everything. And they get these snippets coming here and there. And that keeps us aware that we don't know everything. I'll hone in on this little bit now, because it's another element that comes out of this not knowing. The reason we don't like not knowing is because we hate uncertainty. A prolonged amount of uncertainty on us, especially on an important topic, gives us very, very great physical discomfort. It's an itch you have to get to. What these facets, these elements of mystery are doing is they're giving us enough information to just reach out and feel that we're almost there, but we can't quite reach it. And we know that we should be able to reach it if only we knew an extra bit. And that plays on a real primal urge in us. The human mind abhors a vacuum. It hates not knowing things. And so we have to go and find it. And when we can't find it, we don't feel in control. And isn't that essentially what suspense is all about? If you knew all the plans of the bad guys, you could avoid them. But when you don't know them, but you're aware of the rough outline of it, that's really annoying, okay? It makes us anxious. Add the fact that it becomes a threat as well. That's what elevates the anxiety. So these things also play into the fact, and if you want to write great mystery and suspense, give enough away through these things that just reveal, oh, there's something my protagonist doesn't know. Now they know they don't know. and it spells more of a threat being imminent. What you're doing is you're making the reader feel they're right on the brink of something, but they can't quite touch it. We just did in my Patreon group, The Moonstone. It's not everyone's cup of tea, it's not their favourite story, but it is a masterclass in how to get you to just thinking you're going to resolve something, and then the actual thing you discover opens up another problem. That you realise, I don't have all the information. I thought I was about to get it, and I haven't. And that just pulls the tension along. It creates high suspense. So let's get back to some of these elements. If you think of a classic mystery, you normally think in terms of a murder mystery with a detective. So, what is used here to reveal, or that plays on our not seeing? Clues and patterns. So, when you're reading a book, there are various clues that come along, and some of them are quite overt, and the detective talks about them, and you're given some extra information about the arrangement of a room or the past history of one character to another. You know that these clues present an answer going forward, but you know you're not seeing. And that's what engages us. We have to have a scratch at that uncertainty. And so not knowing drags us along. I only say this, you may think that's obvious, I only say this to explain the maxim behind great mystery and suspense and thrills. That it's not what we see that makes for suspense. It's when we know we're not seeing. So even though we're staring at the whole heap of evidence, there's something we can't see, which is how it all connects, for instance. Or we become aware that some element is amiss. And if we're against the clock, tension grows, for instance. Patterns are the same. Agatha Christie's ABC murders depends upon a pattern. So, the first murder is a person whose name begins with A, and they die in a town that begins with the letter A. The second murder happens in a town beginning with the letter B, and the person's surname begins with the letter B. This begins to grip the whole nation, because eventually your letter is going to come up. This pattern helps us to be, notice what it does, it helps us to be more aware of something we're getting towards, but we still don't see everything. For instance, which town is going to be C, and then D and E? Why are they going by this pattern of A, B, C? Is it just a psychopath, or is there a reason for it? If there's a reason for it, what is it? Do you know, patterns give us an awareness and then reveal what it is we're not seeing. And that builds tension. Do you see how this works? Let's move on. Here's a brilliant one. Cannot overstate how powerful this one is. Sound. Sounds let us know we're not seeing, okay? I remember reading a mystery book with my wife. We sat in bed reading it back and forth to each other, howling gale outside, and suddenly clank, 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 clank. Something was banging in my garden, and that's not nice. It's pitch black. There's this howling storm going on, so you can't even hear beyond that except a really loud noise. My wife says, could you go and find out what that is? And I'm thinking, I don't want to meet my demise in my pyjamas. I've been reading a murder mystery. I was really anxious. What did sound do? It made me aware something was happening, but I didn't know what it was. I couldn't see the whole thing. So I go down in my gym jams, you know, waiting to be slogged over the head with a lead pipe or something in my back garden. Sound is a wonderful, classic, simple device, but honestly always works, especially when handled well. If there's a creaky floorboard, if there's a regular donging of a bell in the distance, that in itself can be like a metonymic device, which almost symbolizes threat or the coming of danger. Those things, a foghorn on a boat in a foggy bay, especially if we're in a situation where we're trying to track down a villain, what does it do? It actually brings your attention to the fact that you can't see everything, because although the boat probably has nothing to do with the story, The point is, you can't see it because of the fog, but you can hear it. That gives our whole being an atmosphere in the book of, we know we have a limited vision. Isn't that brilliant? Do you see how it all comes back to this one thing? By using all of these elements, it's not actually a case of just mixing these elements to make some kind of soup. It's understanding what causes the tension. And your role if you're writing, or your role if you're reading and want to really suck the most out of the book, is to spot these things. To be like, oh, that's built up this tension, that's made me more aware. I don't know why, the atmosphere just makes me feel uneasy. I can't quite make sense. I know there's something out there. Okay? Do you see how terror is way bigger, way more important than horror? If suddenly someone comes running out and smacks a person, guess what? The tension is over. You're now in the adrenalized stage of trying to see your protagonist survive, and or whoever, and if the person's dead, horror. Horror while it's going on, but then horror when they're discovered. It's nowhere near as powerful as terror. So the longer you can keep people from seeing, and to let them know that they're not seeing, the better suspense and mystery goes. There's just a couple of more that we could get into, and the last one is really, really important. The stranger, the outsider, the exotic visitor. Many a story starts, a stranger comes to town. A lot of Agatha Christie's start with a stranger comes to town. Strangers, we immediately don't know everything about them. You have a community that's set up, people know one another, they know the run of the schedule of the community, they know its practices, and then someone from out of town comes. And they may look like everybody else, and you assume, they'll just fit in. But then their behaviours might be slightly odd, and questions begin to be asked. Does anyone know where this woman came from? Does anyone know her background? Does anyone know who she's related to? We don't know. And if they're behaving slightly off, it makes us uneasy. Why? It's none of our business, but as humans, we have this itch. We cannot abide uncertainty. Now you can work with that, and many a novelist has, to slowly open it. And every step of the opening reveals to the people in the neighbourhood an awareness of more of what they don't see. I heard they had a criminal record. That criminal record could have been for, hot wiring a car when they were in college. So what? Done and dusted in the past. But that criminal record could also have been that the buried their grandparents under a patio. We're becoming aware, we know that we're not seeing everything because we see it from the eyes of the society. Do you see how suspense grows? Maybe you could get an answer to what they did in the past, but it opens another question. Maybe it briefly settles someone, and then they're like, hang on, no, because that would mean, okay. So that's the stranger comes to town. Now, if you bring an exotic stranger from some other country, then that becomes all the more quickly unnerving if they're not behaving in a particular way, because you can sense that something's up, or it may not be any of our business, but because they also have different practices and standards and everything, it may be more alarming, but our instinct is to say, don't be prejudiced. So we squash that instinct, but the reader might be thinking, you should listen to your gut. There is something off here. I'm aware of it. I don't know you can't prove it because there's bits missing. You know what you don't know. You know that you're not seeing. That is the same principle. It's not used as much today, but in the past, of course, it was used. In the Moonstone that I mentioned, you have 3 Indian Brahmins come to Britain. Well, you imagine in 1850, they would stand out. And that exotic air is about them, which would make the idea of a curse on the Moonstone have added weight. And it builds an atmosphere, an aura around the story, even though it's not central. Do you see how these elements, you want to be bringing things in, not just from one angle, which collectively keep the reader and the protagonist or people around never quite knowing everything. And the more of that there is, the better, really, if you're trying to make it really suspenseful. Closely akin to the stranger that comes to town and the exotic stranger are secret persons and secret societies. The great thing about these is exactly the same. A protagonist thinks they have life worked out. Everything is orderly because that's what we do with our life. And then suddenly something happens and they become aware, you think of, Enemy of the State by Will Smith, that there's some grand conspiracy, there's some grand hidden cabal who have an agenda and you've stumbled on it, but your whole world collapses because what can you trust? Now you know that you haven't been seeing things correctly. And now you know there are things out there which you haven't yet found, which you need to know in order to be safe because a threat is imminent. So again, terror. You know there's a threat out there moving towards you, but you can't quite understand. These may have access to everywhere. They may have access to the police and all that kind of stuff. Suddenly, if you're in a city, we have the labyrinth again. How do you escape? You can't get out, trapped. Do you see? And all of that is based around not knowing, not seeing clearly. And there's a constant search to make sense of everything. Only when you can get the final piece can it be resolved. This can be done with just an individual character. So let's see, Sherlock Holmes has... Who's the most scary person in all of Sherlock Holmes? It's Moriarty. What doesn't happen with Moriarty for the majority of the books? You don't actually see him. Notice that. The keeping something even physically out of sight builds anxiety. What is this person like? Is not seeing. I remember being told, I don't know how true this is, but I remember being told that when making Jaws, the original film, they had the shark made mechanically, but it kept breaking down. And so they ended up having to film loads of the film without the shark. And that's what makes that film so good. You don't see the thing. You know it's out there, but you can't see. Okay? And I believe, so the rumour goes, Ridley Scott picked this idea up and did Alien with it. If you've seen Alien, apparently it's pretty grim. But apparently for most of the film, you don't see the alien in the film, and that's what makes it terrifying. So there's another one, the secret cabal or the secret person. The final element I want to talk about is the uncanny and the numinous. Now, what I want to say about uncanny, this is not supernatural, which is often how the word uncanny is used. Uncanny means something familiar in an out of familiar place. So, for instance, you think of the scenes in a film where you've got a doll and a little music box playing Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, Rockabye Baby, but all of the lighting is very eerie and you know something bad is coming. It's uncanny. You recognise that it should be pleasant and safe, but this is like the most opposite end of the scale, and it makes it very disturbing. It's sort of cognitive dissonance in our minds. Another example of the uncanny in modern literature would be like identity theft, digital identity theft. What about someone who's got a mask who looks exactly like you, or maybe there is a doppelganger? Whatever it may be, it's something that should be familiar in the world, but is out of sync, and we don't like that. That's sort of a form of it in modern writing. The point about it is it humbles our intellectual hubris. The world which should make sense, in which logic and reason and research should answer everything, is not enough. It's not straightforward, especially if you don't know the motives behind it. So you could say someone's took my identity, but why? And why aren't the police helping? And etc. And when we get the secret cabal comes in. So do you see how all of this is not, the protagonist is aware that they're not seeing everything. And that's what causes mystery. The numinous is that sense of sublime awe in front of something greater than we are. So have you ever stood at the sea and suddenly you felt so small, or a night sky and it's drawn in on you? Those moments If you were to trap someone up a mountain and there's a great avalanche and then no one can get there and you've got a gothic setup of isolation, but you're in this vast snowy wilderness, that you could suddenly feel so small, and suddenly you're taken from your place of being this rational character who thinks they're in control of things to actually, I'm tiny, tiny, insignificant. And that is a great atmospheric device for mystery, because it's a much deeper awareness, not of the threat, although this factors in, but that we are so powerless. And that is a really powerful way to bring everything that makes you aware that you don't know much, or that you're missing something, you're not seeing everything clearly. You see that if someone's being surveilled, okay, but they can't get away from surveillance. And then imagine one of those scenes where you have the protagonist suddenly realizing they're being surveilled everywhere, and they just stand still and are suddenly struck by the immensity of the machine that's watching them. And then the camera zooms out, and as it zooms out you see more surveillance cameras, and it goes out, and then there's a whole city. That's the numinous in sort of modern writing. The point is, they've become very acutely aware that they know so little. And that is a very bewildering and uncomfortable sensation to be in, especially with threat around. This all depends on an element of threat at some point. So those were some of the elements, and not exhaustive, of what you find and will immediately recognize in many books and films that you've watched. But do you see how they all come back to one thing? They are all conduits of the unseen, or the incomprehensible, or at least it could be comprehensible, but as yet you don't have the details. What makes for great mystery and great suspense and great thrillers? It's not about what you see, it's about what we know we are not seeing. If you get that idea deeply in mind, when you're reading, you will have such a taste for great literature. You'll see the mastery of how it's handled, and it won't take the joy out. You'll still be scared stiff. If you're writing, it's going to elevate your ability to keep your audience moving forward through the sense of growing terror, one step to another. And read The Moonstone, even if you don't like the story, just see how not knowing just keeps you going along, and every time you think you've got the piece of information you need, it opens up another door for another question. And that's the cornerstone to great mystery and suspense. Until the next time, I wish you joy in whatever you read.